And my opinion is that that the Second Amendment is probably an individual right and not just a right of a militia. And I think that's where I expect the Supreme Court to rule. I think that is a fair reading of the text of the Constitution. And so I respect the right of lawful gun owners to hunt, fish, protect their families. I respect that. Like all rights, though, they are constrained and bound by the needs of the community. So I have a right to free speech, but I can't just yell fire in this auditorium. I can be prosecuted for that because we've got a larger community interest in preventing mayhem. So when I look at Chicago and 34 Chicago public school students gunned down in a single school year, then I don't think that the Second Amendment prohibits us from taking action to make sure that, for example, ATF can share tracing information about illegal handguns that are used on the streets and track them to gun dealers to find out, what are you doing? And are you just selling them to anybody and filling up vans full of handguns that end up on the streets that are killing kids? The point being that there is a tradition of gun ownership in this country that can be respected, that is not mutually exclusive with making sure that we are shutting down gun trafficking that is killing kids on our streets. And part of the problem, you know, the argument I have with the NRA is not that, is not whether or not people have a right to bear arms. The problem is that they believe any constraint or regulation whatsoever is somehow is something that they have to beat back.
Senator Obama, when you were in the state Senate, you talked about licensing and registering guns and gun owners. Would you do that as president?
I don't think that we can get that done. But what I do think we can do is to provide just some common sense enforcement. One good example, right? This is consistently blocked. The efforts by law enforcement to obtain the information required to trace back guns that have been used in crimes to unscrupulous gun dealers. That's not something that the NRA has allowed to get through Congress, and as president, I intend to make it happen. But here's the broader context that I think is important for us to remember. We essentially have two realities when it comes to guns in this country. You've got the tradition of lawful gun ownership that all of us saw as we travel around rural parts of the country. And it is very important for many Americans to be able to hunt, fish, take their kids out, teach them how to shoot. And then you've got the reality of 34 Chicago public school students who get shot down on the streets of Chicago. We can reconcile those two realities by making sure the Second Amendment is respected and that people are able to lawfully own guns, but that we also start cracking down on the kinds of abuses of firearms that we see on the streets.
As a general principle, I believe that the Constitution confers an individual right to bear arms. But just because you have an individual right does not mean that the state or local government can't constrain the exercise of that right. And, you know, in the same way that we have a right to private property, but local governments can establish zoning ordinances that determine how you can use it. And I think that it is going to be important for us to reconcile what are two realities in this country. There's the reality of gun ownership and the tradition of gun ownership that's passed on from generation to generation. You know, when you listen to people who have hunted and they talk about the fact that they went hunting with their fathers or their mothers, then that is something that is deeply important to them and culturally they care about deeply. But you also have the reality of what's happening here in Philadelphia and what's happening in Chicago.
But do you still favor the registration of guns? Do you still favor the licensing of guns? And in 1996, your campaign issued a questionnaire, and your writing was on the questionnaire that said you favored a ban on handguns.
No, my writing wasn't on that particular questionnaire, Charlie. As I said, I have never favored all-out ban on handguns. What I think we can provide is common sense approaches to the issue of illegal guns that are ending up on the streets.
I'm a life member of the NRA. I hunt, I fish, I love the outdoors. I love this country and I support Barack Obama.
Barack Obama supports gun rights, our right to defend ourselves, the Second Amendment. That's the truth. Here's some more. John McCain's just out of touch. He voted to keep tax breaks for companies that ship our jobs overseas.
We got problems, and I believe Barack Obama is our best hope for true change in Washington.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.